Mark Rawles up. He's running for U.S. House, 8th Congressional District, against, pitty old farmer, raising millions of dollars daily, But Mark, I'm sure you'll enjoy what Mark has to say. Again, the website, the information that we share here today will be there so you can point people and share these videos. So Mark, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll move down the list, and then we'll do questions at the end of all three of them.
Okay, everybody stand. I'm just kidding. We used to do this. Remember how in the late afternoon sometimes they say, okay, everybody stand up, reach, we don't look at that today. Before I begin, I do want to thank all of you for coming. Because your being here, again, means that we, the people, still have the strength, honor, and the courage that's going to be necessary to regain control of our government. And regain control we can and we must. Many of our founding fathers gave their lives to gain our freedom. And many of our relatives, our neighbors, our friends, our acquaintances, they have given their lives to maintain our freedom. And Democrat national leaders Martin Luther King Jr., John and Robert Kennedy gave their lives to gain and maintain our freedom. The Republican national leader Ronald Reagan almost gave his life to remind us that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Well, to finish his speech, one day in our sunset years, we will find ourselves telling our children and our children's children what it was once like living in the United States, where men were free. But for the last 28 plus years, our Republican and Democrat national leaders have been trading, selling, regulating, taking, and giving away our freedom. Now, when I say this, most people will agree. They'll stop, they'll pause, and they'll say, you know what? That's right. And then many will ask, well, how does this happen? And what means are our leaders using? And I say, well, the how is through apathy. You see, if the majority of the people are apathetic and therefore unconcerned and unaware about what is happening in our national government and our state government, then the leaders can pretty much do whatever comes to their mind that they believe will allow them to further advance their political party and personal agendas. But the means by which they're doing it is twisting, turning, and ignoring the greatest single governing document that's ever been written, the Constitution of the United States. And then I offer an example. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of our Constitution concerns treaties. And it states, the President shall have power, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to enter into treaties, provided that 2/3 of the senators present concur. Now, our founding fathers wrote this clause to prevent treaties from being implemented which would benefit a single state, a group of states, or any other minority entities, but be detrimental to the majority of the people, and therefore the United States. But modern leaders have twisted and ignored this clause, and they use a process called Congressional Executive Agreement, whereby only a simple majority of both houses and the President's signature is required to enter into treaties, which may benefit a single state, but be detrimental to the United States. Now, this process was challenged in the courts. Some of you attorneys are well aware of this. I'm not an attorney. But it was challenged in the courts in 2001 because of the effects of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. But because the majority of the people were apathetic, no real political pressure was brought to bear upon the courts or the politicians. Therefore, the practice continues today. As a matter of fact, in October of 2012, Republican U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, covertly, of course. That's the way they do things in Washington. Everything's covertly. Was able to push through free trade agreements with South Korea, Brazil, Colombia, and Panama. It was only a few days later, after the president had signed the agreement, that Senator McConnell proudly announced that an agreement had been reached with Toyota, whereby all the Toyota Camrys that go into South Korea would come from Kentucky. Now that's great for Kentucky. But what are the long-term economic effects of South Korea, Brazil, Colombia, and Panama pushing lower-cost products and services into the American economy? Well, there's two things. Number one, more lost American jobs. And number two, more trade deficits. Now, I understand our national economists say, hey, if we only have a $55 to $60 billion a year trade deficit in the world, and considering we have a $16 trillion economy, that's not nothing. Well, first of all, that's not true. If you look at figures from the American Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, and the Oasis Organization, you will find that our foreign trade deficit is really somewhere between $214 and $264 billion a year. A few pesos. And then you say, well, how has this happened? And what are the effects of this? And I say, well, I'm not an economist, but I have developed a common sense theory of economics that I call funnel economics. And it's really quite simple. It begins with the fact that whenever a small economy and a large economy enter into a free trade agreement, the small economy is always going to come out on top. Now the reason being is that they can produce the goods and services at such a lower cost than can the large economy. And with the free trade agreement, they're able to push those products and services into the large economy. And because the people in the large economy are always looking for a good deal, they're going to buy those products and services. And as they buy more and more of those products and services, the demand for the products and services that are made in the large economy is going to dwindle. Therefore, more jobs are lost. And because the people of the smaller economy really cannot afford to buy an equal amount of products from the large economy, the trade deficit develops. Now here's the big picture. Here's where the funnels come in. Imagine two funnels sitting on top of each other. One has a very narrow opening shaft, the other has a larger opening shaft. And of course, the economy is going round and round inside the funnel. Well, the one on the top represents money coming into our country for our exports. The one on the bottom represents money leaving out of our country for our imports. Now, it doesn't take an economic genius to realize it's not going to be long before that funnel empties. Now, someone said to me, well, hey, how come the funnel's not already empty? Well, there's only two things that's preventing the funnel from emptying, ladies and gentlemen. And both of them are bad. Our federal government is pumping between $75 and $50 billion a month into our economy. And you say, well, wow, where's that money coming from? Well, first of all, our Treasury, they're taking these Treasury notes and they're putting them in the Federal Reserve Bank and they're pumping about $25 billion a month into our economy. And then we're borrowing about $400 billion a year from China. So that's where the other hump is coming in there. And see, the Chinese are very smart people. They're double dipping into our economy. See, not only they got a $280 billion a year trade surplus with America, so they're pulling that out of our economy, but they're also lending us $400 billion a year, so they're getting principal and interest on that. So then, if you take into consideration the $214 to $264 billion a year coming out of our funnel, and you take into consideration our federal government is spending money sort of like pouring water out of a bucket, it's easy to see how we have almost $1 trillion a year deficit. So how can we fix it? Anybody can see the problems, but how do we fix it? Well, it's going to take three things. Number one, we're going to have to reduce the size and scope of our federal government. Not just because it's spending money like one water out of the bucket, but also because it's trading, selling, regulating, and taking away our independence, our sovereignty, our freedom, and our liberty. So we reduce the size and scope of government. Then we have to rewrite our trade agreements. You see, this whole concept of free trade cannot exist unless all the economies of the world are relatively the same. Otherwise, somebody's going to lose, and generally it's been us. So we have to rewrite our trade agreements. And the way we turn it around with the Chinese is really simple. We put additional tariffs on their products. We take 85% of that money, and we pay it back against their debt. And then we take the other 15%, we offer it as incentives to companies to come back into America. And hey, if they say, hey, we're making too much money, we're not coming back. Okay? Well, we put a tariff on them. And we take that money and put it with the other money, and we incentivize American companies to stay here and to build here and to develop here. And the third thing, and this is very important, is we must stop our leaders from twisting, turning, and ignoring our Constitution in order to accomplish their political party and personal agenda. We have to stop that. And the only way that I can think to stop that is to send constitutionalists to Washington. People who understand the Constitution and will live by the Constitution will be directed by the Constitution. That's the only way I know to do it. It only makes common sense to me. And so basically what we have to do next are decisions. Okay? And the simple decision is we'll have to decide if we're going to be a nation of the people, by the people, for the people, or if we're going to be a nation of the few, by the few, for the few. Because the latter is exactly where our Republican and Democrat national leaders have been and will continue to lead us. You see, it is my belief that the Constitution Party is the last vestige of hope for saving the people's independence, sovereignty, and freedom. And that is why I'm running for the United States Congress under the Constitution Party. And that is why I put everything that I can do to awaken people over the last 5 years to the problems that have existed in our nation. I've written letters to the editor of paper, and I thank them, they publish them all. I've written a book, I give speeches. Whatever it takes to awaken the people is what we got to do. But you see, neither Sean, or myself, or Tim, or any one of us can do this by ourselves. Can't do it. It takes you, the people. We need your help and we need your support. And if you have no way to support, okay, then help. Tell your neighbors, tell your family, tell your friends about the Constitution Party. Tell them we're the last vestige of hope for saving their freedom, their independence. Because we are. That's how important we are. We may be small right now, folks, but believe me, when more and more people wake up and they realize all these things are true, they're going to be coming, hey, you guys got it right. We want to join you. Anyhow, I thank you all for listening very much.